Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
When your child is struggling in school, it can feel like you're out of options. Like the system is fixed and you just have to make it work. But what if school wasn't the default? What if there was some other ways that kids can still learn and thrive and get an education? That's what I get to explore with today's guest, Kim, an educator and mom who helps families think beyond the traditional classrooms. I love this conversation because it was an eye-opening, practical, and filled with encouragement for parents who feel stuck. So let's jump into today's conversation. And hey, don't forget your drink. Kim, you have a really fun job where you get to help students, particularly more kind of older students, youth, we'll say, think about school, but in a different way. Could you tell us kind of what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's a really good question because I think as society, we are set up to kind of think that school is the absolute normal and every child should be in school. It is a common thought as well that school is a default, but it's not. It's a parent's choice to register a child at school. So it's also their choice not to do that. And yeah, as you say, I support many, I call them young people because I think children kind of reflect a younger age, kind of 11 and younger. I think when they start to get to that development age, I call them young people. So yeah, I think it's really important to know that there are choices there for them. So these young people and their parents have chosen not to go down the kind of standard route of school and to choose an alternative way of learning. So the alternative kind of methods that I use, so I deliver online learning so that I can reach young people wherever they are. And what we do is it's accredited learning. So although it's kind of seen as a little bit behaviorist, where there is a reward at the end of the learning, the way that the learning is constructed is not like that at all. So I deliver lots of different subjects that I think we always think, I wish they taught that in school. So such as personal finance, which was a really fun subject to do. The young people reacted to that in such a way that they were like, I can't believe how much you go to work to earn, and then you literally get 40% of that money taken off you. And their reaction to that was massive. And it was really interesting to see that they were actually, I was kind of showing them that this is how tax works or this is how national insurance works. And they were then making up their own mind as to what that means for them and what that means for their future. And that's a very constructivism way of working. So I am not telling them constant information. We develop together. We go and find out things, we go and research things, and then they come up with their own thoughts and feelings about that. And so yeah, one of the other subjects that we're doing at the moment is citizenship, which is a really difficult subject because we talk a lot about politics and government. We talk about human rights, and it's kind of their reaction to that as well is very much, well, this is not how I believe the world to be. So like, for example, when we're talking about democracy and like liberty, freedom of speech, and they're like, oh, well, do we all get freedom of speech? Because that's actually not what I see in the world today. So it's really, really interesting to see, how they come up with all of these, their own way of thinking and how they think about the world. But yeah, so it's accredited learning. So it's different because obviously it's not school. It is a little bit structured with the way that, kind of we do sessions online. But what is really good about it as well, it's social learning. So I only have small groups because the majority of learners are neurodiverse. So we bounce off each other, we learn from each other. Somebody asks a question that nobody's ever thought about before, or somebody's experience is completely different to somebody else's. So it's just a great way, really great way of learning.
And so you mentioned you don't have to be neurodiverse to attend this kind of, not attend, but be part of this kind of learning. But it is a large majority of neurodiverse thinkers and people. What is that? Why is that, do you think? Or do you know like why you have a large?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. So yeah, you're correct. You don't have to be neurodiverse. So a large audience of mine is electively home educating. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they are neurodiverse. Some of those have EHCPs, some don't. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a couple of reasons really. And one is that I just don't think school is made for everybody. And that doesn't matter if you're neurodiverse or not. You know, it's definitely not kind of set up for a lot of neurodiverse children. But then it is in some ways as well. So it doesn't matter for me if you're neurodiverse or not. I think just the school setup and structure can be not right for a lot of different people. I think it can be right for some people. So I see some of my son's friends, and some neurodiverse, some not, and they want to be in school. They absolutely, crave that kind of that routine, that constant need to be with other people, no matter what that environment feels like. But for a lot of children or a lot of people, young people, it just doesn't work for them. There's quite a lot of overwhelming factors about school. Like I said, the behaviourist. So, do you know what I mean by like behaviourist theory, or have you heard of that before?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So I always explain it to someone as it's kind of like that. It's that learnt behavior where I always give the example of, so my son has pet guinea pigs, and every time they hear the bag of spinach rustle, they start squeaking because they know they're going to get fed. And that's kind of that. It's kind of that repetitive routine learning. And although there is definitely a space for that, it's not the only way of learning, and it's not always the best way for everybody. And I think the punishment element of school as well, I think, is getting a little bit out of control, if I'm being honest. So, for example, I've heard examples where, a child has not worn their tie in the right way, or they haven't brought the right pen to a class, and then they're getting detention for those kind of things. Is that really what we want to be, teaching our children? Is that the right way to make them feel? I'm not too sure.
Yeah. And how can someone who is maybe, well, not so, I guess a parent, it would be a parent, but like thinking, kind of weighing up those options of is mainstream school working? Is that the right fit for my child, or is, alternative, learning? So whatever that alternative be, I know there's lots of options, but yeah, kind of what is that process maybe, or how can you offer some support to a parent maybe going through that process?
Yeah, I think as a parent, you would know if it is the right place for your child or not. For me, if they're showing signs of, I suppose, just not enjoying it, and it's really difficult, isn't it? Because, I've had a lot of prejudgment in the past about my son not wanting to attend school, and it's just kind of like, well, nobody enjoys school, nobody enjoys that environment. I mean, that's a whole kind of another conversation in itself, isn't it? But I think you know to spot the signs if your child isn't coping in a mainstream school. And, that's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's nothing to be parent blamed for, which is a lot of what's happening. I'm in a lot of kind of communities where I constantly see parents like, to say, I can't get my child into school. I've been that parent that has been there and, forced. I've done the shouting. I've done the, don't be silly, just get in, that kind of tactic. I've also at the same time done the caring and the let's just give it a go, let's just see. And, if neither of those are working, we really need to be thinking about our child's happiness, and mental health for me is the most important thing. And that is definitely the lesson that I have learned through the journey that I've been through, is just seeing those signs, taking action as a parent. Don't be embarrassed about it. It's nothing that either you or your child are doing wrong. It just happens where we've already said it's not the right place for everybody. So there are a lot of communities that are out there that you can join, where you will see that there are a lot of other parents going through this, especially at the moment. And I think to answer your question, if you're somebody that's kind of sat outside of this and, parents or anybody that's going through this, just please don't prejudge. It's really difficult to go through as a parent without other people around you kind of saying, that you're not doing the right things, you're the reason why they're showing these signs. It's definitely, it's not you. It's something that's going on for your child, and it's something that we should be taking seriously.
Yeah, in our house, we kind of do it term by term. So
okay.
We make that decision term by term, because last year was just really horrendous, but we didn't know what else to do. I know a lot of families who are raising neurodivergent kids are always kind of say they feel catapulted or dropped in the deep end, or, that kind of, it's never a easing into process. And that was definitely our experience of being just kind of catapulted into this. And so navigating that. And so after last year, we were like, okay, we just need to take it term by term and see, like you said, is our son enjoying it? Is he, not hitting targets in a, like, he has to hit target, but just in a, like, certain target, like, he has targets that we've set with the school for his education, for his feelings, for his, just overall development. Kind of, so is he hitting those? Why not? Are they too big? What, just kind of always reflecting on that. And it makes it a little more stressful, like not being like, oh, he'll go for a year and then, every term is, we come to the last kind of 3 weeks and we're like, hey, is this working? But we also know that we don't, like you said, like the mental health of our son is important. The happiness of our son, like if a child is not happy, they're not going to learn. Like that's the reality. So it's like all of that mixed in is important to remember. And this year has been a very different experience than last year, but we're even now having those conversations for next year. Like, okay, what does next year potentially look like? What could that be for him? And all of that. It's always ongoing.
Yeah. And I love that way that you're saying tackle it term by term, because that is how you've got to do it. And it's kind of that measure, isn't it? Because sometimes what I found by kind of reflecting on the term by term was that some terms are easier than others. So like terms around like kind of like the first term that he used to kind of go back into school. So that's September to December. It was that the start of it would always be great, and it would be like, yeah, he's doing really, really well. He's happy. And that it's just kind of, I think it was just kind of like the newness of being back in, and actually this is fresh. I've just had a good break. Also things like around Christmas, it's exciting because, they're doing different kind of learning. It's not just all, like sit down, they're learning songs or they're learning plays, and it's, it's a little bit alternative learning. So it can be exciting. But then there are then harder terms, especially kind of like, the winter. So the after Christmas where everything's back to normal. You know how you feel sometimes as an adult when it's like, getting back to it and it's dark outside. It's, it's really, really difficult. So I love that, like term by term measurement. It's short, and I think you can really kind of get a lot from that to say, how are they progressing? Because obviously education is important, and are they showing me through these terms that they are actually learning something, that they are progressing with their education? But I think that's a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, we felt like it was a good, like you said, it gave us a snapshot of how is he doing without it being a whole year, because there were times last year that we were kind of dragging him into school, and that was like, I talk about how I have PTSD from that. Like that was traumatic for me, trying to get him into school, or he would go happily into school. Like this is the hard part. It was like, as soon as he got to the school gate, he would happily walk in, and then 5 minutes later have a meltdown or not cope, whatever. And it was just it was always hard. And so I felt like a year was too long. And so having having that. But yeah, I think it's what, I mean, I know someone who they do every 6 months, it's like whatever works for them, what works for your family and where you are. So yeah, but with kind of alternative learning in the UK, I know it's kind of different in the US, but is there funding for that, or does that depend on how you approach it?
Yeah, that was one of my main points actually that I kind of reflected on, that, when I said about it being kind of like a parent choice and people think that school is default. It is the only option that is free if you don't have an EHCP. It's mainstream school, or, I'm guessing private. I don't really know much about private schooling, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I think those are the only options. And I think that's really disappointing because, I know the EHCPs at the moment are such, a hot topic. There's the reform, the SEND reform being discussed and taking away EHCPs, which, I don't even want to imagine thinking about. But, that is the only alternative. That's the only way that you can get any alternative education is through an EHCP. And not all children that need that flexible, different type of education have SEND. Like we said before, you don't have to be neurodiverse to not kind of fit into that. But yeah, as far as I know, unless you have an EHCP.
Finished training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least that was the plan. Except now the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
What is something, I know you kind of mentioned this before about kind of someone sitting on the outside looking in as a parent makes decisions of education, but what about maybe a family member, or a really good friend who's kind of in a little bit more of their day to day and kind of seeing the struggles and, obviously not making the decision, but maybe kind of supporting that person who is, what could they be kind of doing to help support education or, kind of just help support overall?
And I think this is a really good point. When I reflect on my journey and reflecting on that question, it's only when you're in it, what I call it, when you're in this world, that you actually understand it. The way that I've had to educate myself, and I'm sure that a lot of other parents are exactly the same, is by constantly researching, reading, learning by mistakes. So it is a really difficult place to be. You're constantly thinking about it 24/7. It does like kind of take over your life a lot of the time. And somebody that is a friend that isn't in it, it can be really difficult. I have friends that kind of aren't in this world at all. And it's really difficult to talk to them sometimes about what's going on, because it's not that they don't care. It's just that understanding of how this impacts your life and what it means to you. So I think somebody who is a family member who is supporting somebody, I think the first thing is to educate yourself on EHCPs, on different methods of education, and I suppose, just kind of researching and educating yourself. I read a really, really good book. I can't remember the title of it now, but I will grab it for you. And it was all about doing education differently. And that really, really opened up my eyes to kind of what education can be, and understanding that the kind of direct behaviourist wasn't the only way to learn, and it wasn't the best way to learn. So, for example, I saw in one of the community chats that I'm in at the weekend that one of the parents was kind of saying, my son only wants to play Roblox. I can't get him to do any learning. I can't get him this, that. He's not interested in any of the like sessions that I set up. He just won't learn with me. What can I do? And I think one of the first things is not to shy away from their lead. And so gaming is a huge part of my son's life, a huge part of his education. I support it 100%. And when he very first came out of school, I kind of connected with him in that space I just played with him. I just played games with him constantly. We just, he was like, oh, I'm going on this game now. I was like, yeah, I'll come and play with you. You teach me how to play it. And what he knew and what he could show me about that was unbelievable. And he always jokes with me now and says the way that he really learned how to read was through Minecraft, which I think was amazing, and it's brilliant. So as somebody who is supporting a parent going through this, like I said before, not prejudging, but educating yourself on how other ways education can be done. Not judging somebody by letting their son or daughter just sit gaming, or it might be that that they love colouring, or doing it, just something that you wouldn't look at is education. It is education to them because it's their interest. It's what they love doing. It's probably putting them in a world where they feel comfortable. They are getting success from what they're doing. So, the dopamine is there. They're enjoying what they're doing. And yeah, I think it's just, don't tell them that they are not doing the right thing. Whatever makes their child happy and healthy is the right thing for them at that time. And supporting whatever they're doing. One of the biggest things is just listening. So we're having annual review for our EHCP at the moment. It's a really difficult time. I am just ranting a lot of my friends, literally just talking at them, and they're listening. They're just taking it all in, and they're just listening. They're obviously offering, that emotional support, but you don't always have to come back with answers. I think that's another thing as well to think. It's not always about suggesting that they could do it a different way or something. It is just listening to kind of what they're saying. That emotional support is really, really, really important.
Yeah, that's really a good reminder of like just listening. The power of listening can be so good, and just being able to, like you said, you don't need to have answers to listen. You can just listen, and I kind of empathize and say, oh, that does sound hard. I remember a friend saying that to me and being like, yeah, I just, it was over like a WhatsApp voice note thing. I ranted for like 3 minutes, and she came back and was like, that does sound hard. I'm really, really sorry. She wasn't being like, she was genuine. And I thought, yeah, you've summed up all of that in like 3 words, which was helpful. It was that kind of putting more kind of, words to my emotions and all of the ranting. So I get, having someone to listen is powerful. It can be really powerful and really helpful. So that's cool. I love how, as well, you mentioned like how kind of that education isn't just a classroom. Like you said, like your son kind of not jokingly saying how Minecraft, helped him learn to read. Like education is all around us, and we can take in opportunities to learn. And again, you mentioned at the start of like you're teaching kind of those life skills as much as it is. I always think that we did have, going to school in the US, we did have a life skills class. And I think back, and that was probably the one class I remember the most and actually used like in my life, because it was, some of it now is like kind of irrelevant. Like I learned how to balance my checkbook, which I've never actually owned a checkbook because I now live with debit cards. But, but still like, it was just, knowing like how to do that, and knowing, budgets and, just different like life skills, like you said, and how that actually can be more educational than, I don't want to say than math, because that's my whole family do math, but that, like kind of high trigonometry. I took calculus and don't think I do any of that in my day to day. So my dad will probably listen to this and prove me wrong, but those kind of things, like, just certain things I think I'm like, that class was important. So having those skills, I think we sometimes forget they need to be taught, I guess, is what all that I'm trying to say is, having the skills. We need to teach them, and it's important to teach them. So yeah, it was good reminder. But I love to ask this question at the end, and it is, what do you want the world to know about neurodiverse people?
Oh, wow. That is a huge question. Yeah. What I'd like the world to know is that it doesn't matter if you're neurotypical or neurodiverse. We all have different ways of how we want to live our lives. It's just that kind of that understanding that just because somebody doesn't think the same way as you, it doesn't make them weird, or it doesn't make them different. It doesn't make them less value. And I think this is a thing, because I have that kind of fight with myself all the time, that neurodiversity can be really disabling. It can stop you from doing a lot of the things that you enjoy doing and that you want to do. And then on the other hand, it can be that driver for really being successful in something and really overachieving. So I'll give the example of that. So for my son, for example, he loves socializing. He loves being with people, but it's really disabling for him to be, he couldn't cope in a school environment because it was just too many people. It was too restrictive. Being around all those people makes him so excited. It makes him enjoy it so much that he actually can't cope with the emotions that makes him feel. So just doing it a little bit differently, the control over that, which with his PDA is really important. So he now has that control over choosing how he socializes. So for example, I'll say to him in a week, so these are our options, these are what we can do this week, and he depending on how he is, how he's feeling, where his head's at, he will choose how he socializes and kind of what he does in that week. So I think it's, to kind of go back to the question, I think it's really important to know that, it can be really restrictive, and it can mean that there are a lot of things that are inaccessible, but at the same time, it means that it doesn't mean that they can't do those things as well.
Yeah, like you said, kind of that it's about, I always think about the environment. It's changing the environment, not the person. And the idea that, similar to my son, like he loves people. He loves being with people, which everyone, for a long time, people were like, oh, he can't be autistic because he's so social and he has all these friends. And I'm like, no, this is not what it is. Yeah. But it's similar to your son. Like he can get overwhelmed by how much we always say he gets overly excited, like to the point where he then has a meltdown. Like he's not having a meltdown because he's upset, but he's having it because he's feeling so much excitement. It's hard to explain, but it's like he's just so excited. He's so happy to see these people. He's so, loves being with people that he just gets overexcited and overworked and kind of the other extreme. And so, that idea that we've had to work with not changing him, but changing the environment and giving him the options and stuff. So that's a good reminder and a good way of thinking through as well, of thinking about education in a different way, of like how you're letting your son still have those opportunities to socialize but doing it where he will thrive and in ways that he'll thrive and be able to kind of cope. And so it's a good reminder.
And I think it's that, just a message to parents that have kind of are probably in this situation now that I was in, say, 5 years ago, where there's kind of like, it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You're kind of in that point where your child is like, you can see them suffering at school. You can see that that's not the right environment for them, and thinking, there's no other option. What do I do? There is another option. When we talked before as well about, like, when you asked me the question about funding, and I said, well, it's kind of, I suppose, mainstream or nothing if you don't have an EHCP. There's obviously the other choice of electively home educating. which doesn't have to cost money. There are so many free resources out there, and it doesn't always have to be about accessing things that are structured and things that have accredited learning. You don't always have to do those things. You can do a mixture and kind of pick and choose. But yeah, I think it's really important to know for any parents that are in that situation now, my son is a great example of the fact that there is that light at the end of the tunnel. He can now choose to access these different elements of learning. So we now do one-to-one online learning because he just cannot cope to learn with other people. And that's even in a small online group setting. He will not be able to access that. So his education is very kind of bespoke to him, but that means that he is accessing like his English and maths. He is kind of progressing in that way. He is still getting a lot of his social interaction. His choice on kind of how he does that and where he chooses to go and the people that he'll choose to socialize with, because he feels more comfortable in an environment where, there are less people, less, children or young people understanding as well. And it doesn't matter. So, when I sit and watch what he's achieving in that theatre group, so they're learning a script at the moment. So he is reading, he's remembering all these lines. He'll then stand up and, have to speak in front of people. He couldn't do all of these things in school. And it's like what you said before as well about if they're happy and if they're in the right environment, then they'll learn. If they're not, they can't learn. And that's definitely the reflection that I have on him. What he's achieving now is beyond anything that I expected him to be able to achieve. So yeah, I mean, neurodiversity can be really restrictive as well. It can be, but it can also be so rewarding. Just I love what you said about getting the environment right. Don't change the child, change the environment, change the way that you think. Change, just your understanding. What I've learned going through this journey is massive a lot about myself as well. The way that I parent, the parent that I want to be, about my own neurodiversity. It's been a massive journey, and it's not over yet. But it's a good learning curve, and I'm sure there's challenges ahead that I've not even thought about yet. So I am going to have to keep educating myself. But yeah, I think it's really important to know that neurodiversity isn't restrictive. It is, we are amazing people and we should be celebrated.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Well, thank you so much, Kim, for, kind of having this conversation about alternative to education than kind of the mainstream, but also just, kind of that reminder of learning is happening all around us. And so we can kind of dive into that. So thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
What I'm carrying away from this episode is that education really is everywhere. It doesn't just happen in a classroom. Kim reminded me that when kids are happy and healthy, they learn. And today's vocab moment is EHCP, short for Educational Healthcare Plan, which is a legal document here in the UK. In the US, it's known by an IEP or even a 504, I believe, outlining the support a child with special needs should receive. It's a big part of the education conversation here and worth knowing about if you are navigating the system. Hey friend, if you've got a moment, would you mind rating and reviewing the show? It really helps more amazing people like you find us. Your words make a big difference. So thank you. Go out there and continue the conversation, and we'll see you here next week.